Alright, I want to do some research online because I'm watching videos about, muscle hypertrophy, fat loss, nutrient partitioning from many videos I'm seeing, and it gets confusing to even me. So I wanted to film a little bit of research and see what I can come up with and see if anyone else can be educated by this too. So I'm going to be looking through studies, maybe one study. I'm going to try to find one good study that makes me think what, you kind of have to educate yourself, so you have to see what's out there. So that's what I'm going to do. So if you're new to this channel, subscribe, click like, share the video, click dislike, whatever you want, comment, and let's go. Okay, the first thing I want to look for is nutrient partitioning, and I'm going to go through, I always do NIH to kind of go through the National Institute of Health. Let's see, lipid metabolism and nutrient partitioning, effects of steroid treatment on growth, nutrient partitioning, response to carbohydrate and fat refeeding in the expression. Let's try the first one here. Lipid metabolism and nutrient partitioning. Okay, this is pretty interesting. I want to read this abstract. Lipid metabolism and nutrient partitioning strategies. The increasing prevalence of overweight and obesity worldwide is daunting and requires prompt attention by the affected healthcare profession, government, and the pharmaceutical industry. Because overweight, obesity are defined as an excess of adipose tissue mass, all approaches in prevention and treatment must consider redirecting lipid storage in adipose tissue to oxidative metabolism. Lipid partitioning is a complex process that involves interaction between fat and other macronutrients, particularly carbohydrate. In an isocaloric environment, when fat is stored, carbohydrate is oxidized and vice versa. Okay, it's funny because I looked up isocaloric, just wanted to make sure it's the same amount of calories every day. And when I did that, just looking up the definition, and I put the NIH at the end to get more studies, and it's pretty interesting. Comparison of isocaloric, very low carbohydrate, isocaloric substitution of carbohydrates with protein. Pretty interesting. Back here they said here, an isocaloric, this is from Quora. An isocaloric diet is a diet in which you consume the same amount of calories each day from fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. As you can see, an isocaloric diet is moderately high in fat and protein and relatively low in carbohydrates compared to other diets. I don't know that. It mean anything to me, but I like the fact that I went with NIH here, put NIH at the end. Isocaloric substitution of dietary carbohydrate intake with fat intake determine total volumes of visceral, subcutaneous, and hepatic fat content in middle-aged adults. This looks like something I would do another video on, so I'm going to keep that tab open. Let me continue with this abstract. So in an isocaloric environment, when fat is stored, carbohydrate is oxidized and vice versa. Processes that influence fat partitioning in a manner in which weight is maintained must be modified by changes in organ-specific fat transport and metabolism. When therapy is considered, however, changes in lipid partitioning alone will be ineffective unless a negative energy balance is also achieved, i.e., energy expenditure exceeds energy intake. The intent of this review is to focus on molecules including hormones, enzymes, cytokines, membrane transport proteins, and transcription factors directly involved in fat trafficking and partitioning that could be potential drug targets. Some examples of favorably altering body composition by systemic and/or tissue-specific modification of these molecules have already been provided with gene knockout and/or transgenic approaches in mice. Translation of this science to humans remains a challenging task. Okay, so we have its date is this from? This is from 2004, so this is oldish. So there's no study here, just the abstract. Alright, I'm gonna go with I think this is a study that is before it. Postprandial nutrient partitioning but not energy expenditure is modified in growing rats during adaptation to a high protein diet. And this is from 2010. Let's see what they say. Again, it's just the abstract. It has been suggested that high protein diets may favor weight management by lowering energy intake and reducing body fat. Whether these effects results from changes in energy metabolism remains unclear. We measured the adaptation of energy metabolism components during 2 weeks of high-protein feeding. 50 male Wistar rats were switched from a controlled diet to an high-protein diet. 14 and 55% of protein respectively for 1, 3, 6, or 14 days. Energy expenditure and substrate oxidation were measured by indirect calorimetry in feed-deprived rats, and after consumption of a test meal, energy expenditure components including the thermic effect of feeding and activity were not modified during adaptation to a high-protein diet. Nutrient oxidation in feed-deprived rats was not affected by HP feeding except for an early increase in protein oxidation. After 1 day, the postprandial inhibition of lipid oxidation was blunted. Carbohydrate oxidation decreased by 1/2 and urea clearance decreased by 66%. Thereafter, carbohydrate oxidation gradually rose, resulting in a null carbohydrate balance. Lipid oxidation and urea clearance recovered after 3 days of adaptation to a high-protein diet, while protein oxidation reached a plateau. The postprandial oxidation of carbohydrate counterbalanced the amount of ingested carbohydrates as soon as 3 days, leading to a null postprandial carbohydrate balance. We conclude that the inhibition of de novo lipogenesis from dietary carbohydrate, but not energy expenditure and lipid oxidation, may participate in limiting the adiposity induced by high-protein feeding. The transient changes occurring during the period of adaptation to the diet highlight that the duration of the diet is critical in high-protein diet studies. Okay, so from what I'm understanding, basically you're not producing any more fat because the amount of carbohydrates you take in kind of get oxidized, so there's no excess carbohydrates that can turn into fat. That's the only thing that seems to be changing when you have a high protein diet, and it seems that it takes 3 days before things balance out. Doesn't happen on the first day, but it takes 3 days. So that's kind of what I get from the conclusion. It says that the postprandial, like after you're eating, the oxidation of carbohydrates counterbalanced the amount of ingested carbohydrates as soon as 3 days, leading to a null postprandial carbohydrate balance. We conclude that the inhibition of de novo lipogenesis, creating new fat cells or lipids, from dietary carbohydrates, but not energy expenditure and lipid oxidation, may participate in limiting the adiposity induced by high protein feeding. So it's not because you're burning more fat or you're burning more energy, it's just that you're not producing more fat because the carbohydrates balance out. And then it says here, the transient changes occurring during the period of adaptation to the diet highlight that the duration of the diet is critical in high protein diet studies. Okay.